So I thought I'd put in my 2 cents into the whole abortion debate, and to be honest, I've avoided getting too involved with it, but I have seen a lot of noise being made about it, just as it generally is made when these things go down, that just has all the people distracted and dividing and judging and getting on their respective soapboxes and telling it how it is like it's gospel. Let me tell you how it is like it's opinion, for starters, because that's what I have, an opinion. I'm just another fellow human being, nothing godly about me. I didn't write the rule book, so I don't know these ordained laws. I can only tell you what makes sense to me, and this is what makes sense to me. Let's start off with the idea of people saying you shouldn't murder a baby because it's taking a life, and it's just not good. It's murder, right? Now, if you're saying it's taking a life, it's not even one. When the abortions happen, the thing doesn't really have a rational awareness. It can't process the signals in its brain and interpret what's going on in any meaningful or tragic way, okay? But people still say on principle it is a life that could be a life, so spiritually you're taking away its opportunity to live its life and you're murdering it. Alright, well, let's look at that for a second. Let's look at spirituality. And let's not let's not get stuck on the whole airy-fairy notion that life is precious, life is sacred, one should not take life, without actually assessing the functional parameters of what spirituality is about. And, looking at that, what stands out to me from everything I've read is that, it's a general idea that when we enter this life, when any person enters a life, they actually choose the life they enter. And, whether they take it into the ring of fate and they're presented with a few versions of different lives they could live, they can see all the different points, the big pivotal points that occur in life in advance, and a soul signs up for a life in order to, resolve its karmic imbalances, in order to balance itself out. So what might seem bad to us is actually an opportunity for a soul to advance on a deeper level, okay? So appearances can be deceiving. And this is the thing I don't understand. Why would a soul, on this basis of spirituality, which isn't just to say life is sacred, but actually looking at what the fuck that means, that life is spiritual, and the spiritual idea that we choose our life, that there is fate, so it's not just about a little blob that doesn't have sentience being prematurely terminated, but it's about a soul, right? If you're going to talk about soul, add some fucking parameters to what that fucking means. And it annoys me because people will be airy-fairy and use these notions to defend and to judge and to prove a point, but then the actual idea of soul only goes so far. They won't actually explain what that means. And to me, what it means is we choose. The soul chooses. This is why they say a life is a life, it's sacred, even if it's just a piece of meat that can't sense. It's still a soul that would have lived. Well, along that line of thinking, you wouldn't choose to be born into that kind of body. All right, unless it somehow serves you going through that experience, you wouldn't choose to be born into the body of a baby that's aborted. It makes no sense. Secondly, just rationally looking at this, there's a lot of suffering in the world, all right? And if you knew, let's say we lived in a world where instead of slaughterhouses for animals, we had slaughterhouses for humans, and let's say you knew there were some children being bred for the sake of being slaughtered for food, right? Because we want to feed our pets the primo stuff. I don't know. Then would you look at it and say, well, you know what? It's mercy. It's not right doing that. You should halt all production of these life forms for the sake of mass manufacturing and slaughtering. You should halt that and, in fact, stop doing it. All right? And might there even be any mercy in the idea of killing some of these creatures before they develop sentience, if you know that they are destined for a hard life, one that could barely be called a life at all. If a child, or if a child was pregnant somewhere in the world who's only 12 years old, is it a sin then for that child to not be born into poverty, into a third world conditions? If a junkie for the 7th time has a child, is it a sin for them to consider not having a child, even though they don't have the means, the finances, the way of life suitable for a child to thrive in? Sometimes one bad now can prevent a whole bunch of misery later, and it's not black and white, and it's not simple, it's not clear cut. what is the right choice to make. There are things that you can argue on both sides. I would say context is always relevant, and somehow people think you can just make a law absolute as if it stands regardless of context, which is idiotic. Because without context, without the parameters of what the fuck's going on, the situation, the people involved, all the different factors that you should consider, without even looking at that and just like, no, I'm just standing by my one law. Abortions are wrong. To me, it's kind of blind. To me, it's being blind to what soul means, blind to the idea that the soul chooses. So therefore, probably wouldn't choose to be born into that body, and therefore the soul isn't being killed. All right, they're blind to these ideas of soul. They'll say, oh, it's spiritual enough for it to be wrong, but not so spiritual that any of what I just said makes any sense. All right, and then you got the philosophical argument. All right, to kind of like cracking eggs to break a few omelette, but it's not really. It's the opposite of that. You got to crack a few eggs in order to keep the omelette from being made. You got to keep the eggs there, or stop the process in order to stop those eggs from being made. And I can agree with the whole crack a few omelets to make an egg, or crack a few eggs to make an omelette, and sometimes to not make an omelette. Sometimes it might be better off that omelet's not made. And this is the third thing, going back to spirituality, free will. How can you judge anyone if indeed we have these souls, these spirits that are making choices for us, if even we are being controlled and inspired from some other worldly or some higher intelligence, some God that is determining everything, you know what I mean, and acting its vision, expressing and manifesting its vision through us. If that's the case, you can't really hold any person accountable, an individual, because they're not in complete control to begin with. If you subscribe to the idea of God having a big overarching plan and fate and all that stuff, then everything is fated. The child not being born is fated, and the soul choosing not to go into it thus is fated. And maybe that was because that child could have avoided living a fucking horrific life that would be on your shoulders if you're a pro-lifer all the way. All right? All of that can just be, missed. Just leave that. Sometimes it might be right for that to happen. Sometimes it might be wrong for an abortion to take place. It depends on what the fuck you believe. And you really should be more respectful in considering that not everyone believes what you believe. And at the end of the day, if you don't want to talk about soul and what is right, then we're talking about a non-sentient blob of meat, so go fuck yourself.